to share. Sorry.
Okay. Morning. Thanks, John. I was thinking that one of the things that is really special and unique about this authority board is that we take this moment to ground ourselves before diving into the work. So just want to say thanks for the opportunity. Today, we'll be discussing an agenda item about the potential for the severe federal budget funding impacts to astronomy, and that's been concerning me a lot lately, and I feel this great burden of responsibility to Hawaii Astronomy, the organization I lead, our efforts in the community, and so forth. And of course, outside of astronomy, decisions by our federal government have broad impacts on the health and well-being of our community members, our AINA. And so all of this has been weighing pretty heavily on me lately, and I was reflecting on this. And I imagine for some of you as well. But last week, my wife and I took a moment to get away, and we were fortunate to go to Halema'umau and witness the eruption that was happening. And I see that she just erupted again yesterday. And it was such an incredible, awe-inspiring moment to witness these fountains of lava, hundreds of feet high, and the powers of both destruction and creation happening in the same moment. And so later I was talking to a good friend of mine and sharing that experience as well as this situation that has been weighing on me so heavily. And she had been going through some personal stuff of her own as well. And in our conversation, she shared with me a Hawaiian saying and translation, which I wrote down and want to share with you, and just apologize in advance if I mess this up at all. But she said to me, look at my notes here, Pu'u honua ka ike a'o akamake. And the translation she gave to me was, refuge is found in the wisdom gained through hardship. And what resonated for me was this duality of destruction and creation. And it reminded me to keep learning and looking for positive opportunities in the difficulties. And bringing this back around to our work as authority, I feel, we're making these really positive strides on our collective vision. At the same time, it can be very challenging. And this was a reminder to myself in the authority work to continue to learn and seek opportunity in those challenges. So just wanted to share that. Mahalo.
Thank you, Rich. We are in very challenging times, but we'll try to seek that opportunity to develop and grow. Is the senator on? Okay, we have one person that signed up for testimony. He's not online right now. Senator Awa has asked to appear before us, so we'll pick him up when he joins the Zoom cast. With that, I move on to item number 3, approval of the minutes of May 8th. Any amendments, any changes that anyone wishes to suggest? All right. If not, if we're going to get a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye or raise your right hand, please. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Most of the chair's report is going to be led through the discussion under the administration, so I have nothing further to add except to kind of emphasize what Rich is saying, that this federal funding issue is very significant, not only to MKSOA but to the future of astronomy in general on the Mauna. So our focus is going to really have to be like tight, and we have to understand what's happening. And the challenge is that there's a lack of clarity, and there's no one specifically you can talk to gain clarity about the federal funding cuts, but we'll get more into that in the report. So with that, there's nothing to report on governance. I'd turn it over to Executive Director DeFries on the administration report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Rich Matsuda, for that opening. The first item is a recurring item having to do with our interim office. We did commit to vacating Imiloa, and I want to thank Greg John and the team at CMS who have kind of opened their doors as a interim step to the interim office. But I'll have Bill update the board on where we are relative to our interim office. Bill?
Thanks, John. Just very quickly, the interim office at 688 Kino Ole, the process continues. The process involves recently Department of County General Services asking for sending a letter of intention to the property manager. Property owners have an opportunity to review the lease. They took several weeks and responded late last week with comments to DAGs regarding the lease. The package is now being prepared and will be sent to the Deputy AG for review. So it's moving. It's glacial, but it's moving. So that's what I have to offer about that. And with regard to Imiloa, thanks to the staff there, I have moved out completely. Pua is in the process of moving, and we will hopefully meet the commitment or shortly thereafter of being out by June 15th. So that's what I have.
Thanks, Bill. Any questions on the office? Okay. Item A2. I think 2 days ago you received a email from me announcing the cancellation of that June 26th date. Going back to a site visit I personally made on May 12th to the high school. I left that site inspection confident that the approval was forthcoming and was given that indication by the facilities chief. As it turned out, that final approval did not move efficiently through the hierarchy at the school. And we made the decision, we found ourselves approaching the 2-week mark and felt that that would not be fair in getting word out to the community. So you should anticipate board members being polled. The preferred date is July 17. And I would ask any of you, again, the format is 5 to 7. We report at 3 o'clock to prep and get the room set and get our roll set. So if you would just respond to Pua and myself as soon as possible as to whether July 17 will work. That's again the Thursday following our July board meeting. After discussing it with the chair, it isn't, for those that are coming in off island, it is an overnight commitment. Rightfully so, there's a concern about being with the community and then everybody having to exit quickly for a flight. So keep that in mind and we'll make the necessary arrangements. So again, we apologize for that adjustment and we'll keep you abreast about the July 17th date. Has Member Kudo come on?
Yeah.
Okay. At this time, I'm going to ask Member Ben Kudo for an update on the incredible work that the transition working group has been undertaking. Ben?
John, before you go there, Puena, will you be working on transferring doing the same flight itinerary?
Yeah, once we have a date confirmed, then I can actually change the flights.
Okay, I'll plan accordingly. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay, Thanks, John. The long-term transition working group has been meeting, as you all know. We're making substantial progress in our review of the documents. We are presently finishing up on the third tranche of documents, and we'll begin the fourth tranche of documents, which is our last tranche, soon. That will occur in our July meeting on the fourth tranche. If we assume 2 meetings to cover the fourth tranche of documents, we should be through with our document review of all assets and liabilities by September of this year, early September of this year. However, the review does not include a review of the CDUA permits, which has been pending the Attorney General opinion. I'm working with Linda on getting that opinion from her office. If we assume that the opinions will be produced sometime before September, then we will be able to proceed on either reviewing the CDUAs, or it will be unnecessary for us to review the CDUAs. In either situation, we should be complete with all of our work and preparing the draft master transition report to the UH Board of Regents and this particular board within the August to October 2025 timeframe. So sometime later this year. If the transition draft master transition report is approved by both boards, once that's done, we move to the implementation of the transfers. My optimistic expectation is that we will be hopefully finished with the implementation phase within a year. So that places us hopefully in either late 2026 or early 2027. We will have completed the transfer of assets and liabilities from the University of Hawaii to MKSOA in that timeframe. So from a staffing standpoint, John, I think you need to be prepared to have sufficient staff to cover the maintenance of those documents and carrying forward of any obligations and responsibilities from late 2026 to early 2027. That's why I'm giving you the dates, is so that you can prepare. But that's the best estimate of when our group will be finished with our work. So we are making very, very good progress right now.
Thank you, Ben. Anybody have any questions about the work of the working group? It is complex, and each monthly meeting is revealing just the depth of the work that's required. Yes.
So thanks, Ben, for all your hard work, and thanks to the members of the committee.
Well done,
Just-
Ben.
just
Thanks.
Everybody is aware what Ben is doing with asset transfer has to coincide and has to be coordinated with the challenges of bringing the employees over, has to be coordinated with the idea of where we are with a master plan, management plan, administrative rules. So there are 3 big pieces that have to be coordinated together, because you can't move the assets without moving the people. You can't move the people if you don't have the guidance for those people about what they do. So anyway, it's going to be a pretty large coordination effort. So thanks to Ben to getting us all lined up on the asset transfer. But like I said, it's going to be is very complex to make this transfer. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. In the opening, you heard Rich Matsuda reference the federal budget reductions that have impacted across the board everyone in the astronomy business here. So, Rich, I'm going to have you provide an update at this time.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Happy to give the update. There might be a little bit of redundancy with Greg, report, but we'll resolve that if need be, if there's any uh, lack of consistency in what we report. I'm basing this on the best information I could find in the public documents. So a lot of news about these severe federal budget cuts to astronomy, including observatories on Mauna Kea. And in conjunction, NSF came out with new statements on the 30-meter telescope. So my objective is to summarize these for the board for everyone's situational awareness. I'll cover the context, where we are in the federal budget process, the specific cuts to the existing observatories, and the statements on TMT. An important caveat I have to say is with regard to what the impacts would be on the observatories. I really can't speak for the observatories, so I'll just report on what the cuts are. But if you ask me, like how that would impact operations, I only can speak for Keck. The federal budget cuts that I'm talking about here are the ones that came out in the president's fiscal year 26 budget request to Congress. So those that was released on May 30th, about 2 weeks ago, and fiscal year runs October through September. So fiscal year 26 is October 2025 through September 2026. The federal agencies that primarily fund astronomy on Mauna Kea are NASA, the National Science Foundation, NSF, and the Smithsonian Institution. And the top level is in this budget request that came out 2 weeks ago. The administration called for a 24% overall cut to NASA's budget, which includes a 66% cut to the Astrophysics Division and 32% cut to the Planetary Science Division. And those are the two divisions that are the main sources of funding for Mauna Kea observatories. For the NSF, a 57% overall cut. And Smithsonian, I believe, is about a 12% cut. Why this is important in my mind for our board to understand is that shared services on Mauna Kea that serve both the operational needs of the observatories and the services to the public, like road maintenance, visitor information station services, halepaku, etc., are heavily dependent on funding from the observatories. And so these budget cuts are, maybe an impact. Longer term, as we all know, it's our kuleana to work with the community to determine the carrying capacity of the Mauna, including footprint for astronomy and a sustainable funding model. And if these federal cuts go through as proposed, there will be long-term implications that we need to understand. And then lastly, as board members, we know that we serve as conduits of information to the community about all aspects of Mauna Kea, so it's really important for us to be informed. Then just going a little bit beyond the board's immediate sphere, I guess, of responsibility and more to public information, I think it's important to understand the broader impacts of these cuts if they go through. So I'm not speaking the details, but just things for our awareness and to be thinking about. So from a national, international perspective, Mauna Kea being the highest, most highly scientifically impactful ground-based astronomy site in the world, these US federal funds contribute significantly to supporting the research and advancement of capabilities, like through new instrumentation, which would be impacted by these cuts. Cuts to grants for astronomy students and postdoctoral fellows will have devastating impacts to the future of the profession and education for US research institutions, and in the broadest sense, diminish the US's science leadership internationally and already causing an outflow of expertise to foreign countries. In Hawaii, the Institute for Astronomy is a flagship program at UH, which will be harmed, and I'll speak more about this and summarize the article that just came out from the director, Doug Simons. The observatories and associated astronomy related entities employ about 600 staff who reside on Hawaii Island, and these cuts put some of these jobs at risk and affect those people and their ohana. And then the observatories have many programs for workforce development, education, community service that are an important kuleana to us, and that could be impacted. So moving on to the budget process, let me share a little bit of an overview on the process and where we are today. And the most important takeaway is remember that Congress appropriates the dollars, and the president's budget that came out 2 weeks ago is a proposal only. So part of the uncertainty that Chair mentioned is that this won't become final until Congress passes appropriations bills. So both the Senate and House will be holding subcommittee and committee meetings to mark up the appropriation bills that involve, like I said, NASA, NSF, and Smithsonian. And then these bills eventually go to floor votes of the full House and Senate. And per the latest schedule, the House markup for these science-related things will occur in early July. The Senate schedule, as of yesterday when I checked, has not been released yet for these committee hearings. And then undoubtedly these bills will be have their differences and need to go into conference committee to settle any of those differences. If those are not settled by the beginning of the fiscal year, it's typical that they will pass a continuing resolution to keep the government open. And that usually means authorizing temporary continuance of the prior year's budget. And so, adding to this uncertainty is that we won't know the final fiscal year 26 budget until after the fiscal year begins in October in all likelihood. So the Mauna Kea Observatory impacts, what I'm going to cite is coming out of the NSF, NASA, and Smithsonian budget documents that were released on 2 weeks ago. And in a broader sense, I just wanted to give you a picture of how it affects Mauna Kea astronomy. So of the 10 facilities on Mauna Kea, the operations and maintenance of half of them are either fully or partially funded by federal dollars. So that is Gemini North, the IRTF, KEC, submillimeter array, and the VLBA. And then furthermore, UH, which is heavily dependent on federal funding, owns and operates UCURT and UH-88. So there may be, in addition, there may be smaller federal research or technology grants that involve the other observatories as well, but that's at a smaller level, so I'm not including in this summary. So if I go through that list, Gemini operates twin telescopes on Mauna Kea and Chile, and the cuts proposed are for that whole system of both north and south. And so it's not determined yet how it'll impact specifically Gemini North. And that budget cut for Gemini is 39.3% compared to FY24, or a reduction of 9.7 million in operations and maintenance funding. And I believe NSF makes up about 70% of the budget of Gemini. And in the NSF budget report, it says that Gemini telescopes will operate at approximately 50% capacity if that budget goes through. For Keck, we have a cooperative agreement with NASA that funds 1/6 of our operations, which is zeroed out in the FY26 NASA budget request. This is a reduction of about 5 million a year in Hawaii operations. For the sub-millimeter array, which is a joint venture of the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory, or SAO, and Academia Sinica in Taiwan. SAO is a parent organization of several facilities worldwide, and SAO's federal funding is cut by 25% in the president's budget. It's not clear how much that will impact SMA on Mauna Kea. I spoke with SMA's director, Tim Norton, who told me that SMA remains one of SAO's highest priority observatories in the world, and SAO has federal obligations to complete $5 million of facility upgrades to SMA. So it gives you an idea that it's unclear how that 25% cut to SAO kind of flows down to SMA, but SMA has a high standing. For the IRTF, the NASA budget request calls for fully funding IRTF operations. And they give some reasoning for that IRTF is, I'll just read off what it says. IRTF continues its mission of strategic support of NASA flight missions and science goals in both planetary science and astrophysics, while being on call for rapid response observations of near-Earth objects, targets of opportunity, and potential threats. What they mean by that is asteroids. For the VLBA's budget is not reduced in the NSF budget request. VLBA is this array of 10 telescopes across the US and is used for high precision astrometric studies and high resolution imaging, and provides critical measurements for accurate functioning of GPS. The parent organization is taking some cuts, but it doesn't appear to impact VLBA. So that's the MKO cuts. And then I mentioned the UH impacts. And I'll just quickly mention a couple things, not to speak for EMS or IFA, but just point out a few things for us to be aware of as a board. So for CMS, Greg had previously informed us prior to this budget request about impacts to stewardship funding regarding the RTRF, or Research Training Revolving Funds, which I understand to be derived from indirect cost recovery from federal grants. And I think this just makes that situation more difficult, and I'm sure Greg will keep us informed of impacts to CMS funding. For IFA, I mentioned there's this article that came out, and you can go to UH News and suggest that you look it up. And I'll just quickly summarize the 5 major points that Doug Simons, the director, made in that article. Was impact to grad students and research. So a large fraction of the graduate program is sponsored by NASA and NSF grants, and a large fraction of UH's observing time on all the telescopes go to these grad students and involve undergrads. So a lot of concern being expressed about the education program. Not related to Mauna Kea specifically, but there's a 40% cut to the Daniel K. Inouye Solar Telescope on Maui in NSF funding. The third point was impact to Hawaii's global leadership in astronomy, that in the Northern Hemisphere for the US, much of the ground-based astronomy program is here on Mauna Kea and in Hawaii. And also US involvement in facilities in Chile is also being impacted. And Doug's statement was that if we do not reverse these cuts, then leadership will shift from the US to Europe and Asia. The fourth, as I already mentioned, is impacts to Hawaii's economy in terms of economic impacts, jobs, et cetera. And the fifth point was relief from Doug regarding that funding was largely untouched on these detection of near-Earth objects like asteroids. So IRTF, PanSTARRS, and ATLAS, which IFA is involved in, remain intact. So I encourage you to read that article. And then I just have a quick summary of TMT, and then I'm done. So on May 30th, NSF posted an update stating that, and I'll quote here, they decided to delay holding National Historic Preservation Act Section 106 consultation meetings, and this is for TMT, to allow time to assess how to align this effort with other agency-wide activities. NSF appreciates the commitment of the consulting parties and will share updates concerning when the Section 106 process may resume. And then on the same day, the budget request came out, and an excerpt of that statement was reading again from that budget request. Given the unaffordability of continuing funding two different multi-billion-dollar telescopes, NSF will advance the Giant Magellan Telescope, GMT, into the major facility final design phase, but the 30-meter telescope, TMT, will not advance to the final design phase and will not receive additional commitment of funds from NSF. TMT came out with an official response, which can be found on their website and has been cited in several news articles. So they say that TMT is one of the most compelling opportunities for discovery in this generation for the US to demonstrate global leadership in astronomy and for partnerships with communities desiring to shape the future jointly. With its 30-meter segmented mirror and powerful adaptive optics, TMT will deliver images sharper than those from the James Webb Space Telescope, enabling groundbreaking research into the earliest galaxies, the nature of dark matter and dark energy, and the search for life on exoplanets. This level of innovation not only promises transformational scientific discoveries, but also serves to inspire future generations and strengthen the foundation for new knowledge. We are disappointed that the NSF's current budget proposal does not include TMT. This moment calls for leaders to recognize the strategic importance of TMT to blaze a trail to the next frontiers of science via next generation technology innovation, a Pacific Rim partnership, and unique access to the Northern Hemisphere sky. We remain firmly committed to finding a path forward for TMT and imagine a future in which NSF participation in TMT would open opportunities for significant discovery to the entire US science community, and they welcome further conversations to make this a reality. They go on to talk about Mauna Kea being a leading site and they for astronomy, and they appreciate their many supporters. So just to wrap up here, just, there are these major budget impacts to existing observatories, to UH's program. Congress is discussing budgets and will be finalizing appropriation bills later this year, so we won't know final numbers for some time. And then regarding TMT, the budget request does not include TMT at this point. TMT continues to seek to go forward. So sorry to take up so much time, but I wanted to provide as accurate a report as possible. And Paul.
Thank you, Rich Matsuda. Any of the board members specific to Rich's report have any questions or comments?
Hello, I get a question. Thank you, Rich. That was really good. And then I see Lana Killigan question too. So let me just jump in there.
Yeah.
So the reduction, we said no reduction for RFPF. Is that true?
VLBA, I think it's. Oh, IRTF, yes.
Yeah. So RFPF. Yeah. So no reduction, and that's because not like it's because of military kind of national security kind purposes. No.
It's near Earth objects, which is asteroids. So detecting things coming towards Earth, like asteroids.
Right. So that the government fully sounds like the administration fully supports that idea of having protections from asteroids. So that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's why they're not being. That's why there's no reduction in funds. Okay, how about so would you also say that the FLBA that the reason for them not defunding is because of the importance of the GPS?
The LBA is a combination of, actually I have the statement here that I can reference. Excuse
Okay.
me, hang on one sec. So I can give it to you accurately. Where did I put that? Yeah, so for VLBA, talk about the, because VLBA, the antenna on Mauna Kea is one of 10 across the US, yeah? And they use it for high precision astrometric studies and high resolution imaging, but it's also critical for measurements of Earth orientation and data necessary for the accurate functioning of GPS.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. For your opinion, would you also say that would it be that's one of the ones that somebody said that might be one of the ones that no need even be on the mountain, can be Paca Ranch and would still get the same effect, same kind of a strength, or no?
Yeah, yeah, I cannot speak for them, but be happy to ask them to come respond to that. But I don't know the answer to that, Mayor.
Okay. So follow-up question maybe for John DeFries or John Kumunji. So that's important, right? That's right. Because if only be on you're trying to make the mountain better. So some of that is taking some of these telescopes off the mountain. Okay, and then the other question I get, so you said that is it because if TMT funded, we know that the protections, what do you call it, the Ranger program, because TMT supports UH's budget, like the last presentation was like almost half of the budget, the TMT budget. The 1.something million is actually going to UH. So with TMT being defunded, is that why UH is being defunded?
No, wait, let me answer that. The CMS, IFA controls what you call it, the shared services side, right? And I'm talking to Gray right now. And CMS controls more the sustainability.
Well, they're all together in CMS, but the budget for the shared services side is 82% funded by the observatories.
So any cut to the observatories puts in jeopardy their ability to contribute what they're contributing now. The other thing that people are not aware of is that there's a formula which kind of cuts out what each observatory share is. The larger observatories, such as Gemini, are taking a larger disproportionate share than the smaller observatories. So in other words, the big observatories are sort of subsidizing on this 82% some of the smaller observatories. So if their funding is impacted, there's a question about whether or not they can, first of all, just continue to fund some of the shared services monies and then shared services expenses. And secondly, whether they can continue to subsidize the smaller. So if for whatever reason they're able to fund but not subsidize, that puts additional pressure, financial pressure on each of the smaller observatories to come up with more money to pay for their proportionate share. Now, TMT's side is more funding conservation, the education portion of all the duties that CMS undertakes.
Okay. So there's a lot of words.
Mayor, let me answer the question. My lay understanding of VLBA. You asked whether or not VLBA could be on Parker Ranch. I don't know about Parker Ranch, But of the
So, you know,
10, of the 10 observatories, some of the observatories that are part of that GPS system are located at sea level.
right. Okay, so there is the possibility of that too. So, all right. So I got some thoughts later on. If you guys like know my
Okay,
impression.
let
Later on.
me ask this question first, and then we come back to open it up for discussion, if that's okay with you.
Yep, that's fine. Thank you.
Colum, I didn't have a question. I was pointing to Uncle Neo had his.
Yeah, so the opening is Lanakila turning it over to the main attraction, Neo Hana. You had a question or comment?
Yeah, a couple questions. First of all, Rich, great empathy for the effect this is having on the lives of individuals, both personally, how it affects them personally, as well as work that they're very passionate about. So I can only imagine that this is highly disruptive and angst generating. So please extend our aloha to all those who are affected. You know, we have individual interests affected here as well as a collective interest. So as people advocate during the markup process and so forth for restoration, is there any effort, has there been an agreement to be united in setting priorities? Is everybody going to be going after their self-interest, pursuing their self-interests, or individual institutional interests, or is there going to be a coordinated approach on that side? And then the related question is, what is MKSOA's role in all this as a body? What advocacy should we be preparing ourselves for?
Yeah, thanks. Let me answer your second question first. So I think I mentioned this briefly, but in our long-range planning of determining what the carrying capacity is and how we'll determine a sustainable financial plan for that, which we haven't done yet, so it's a little hard to advocate for it. I think we have to find that right balance and then assure that we have solid future funding for it, which will involve some level of federal funding, just because the observatory passes through the observatory. So being able to articulate that, I think, and that's part of the kuleana of, if you are doing astronomy on Mauna Kea, then you should be contributing to the well-being. So being able to articulate that, I think, would be helpful. I think maybe it's missed sometimes, because we're creating something new, so it hasn't flowed all the way through in everyone's mind. With regard to the speaking with one voice about advocacy, that's definitely the intention. If you look at Doug's article, for example, in which he's talking about the system and the importance of the system as a whole on Mauna Kea. The directors have monthly meetings, and this is obviously a topic of conversation for the director. The ability to advocate at the Congress is the ability to speak freely at Congress varies with the different organizations, because some are fully funded federally, and so they're kind of capped on what they can say. Part of the administration and contractually. So for folks like Keck Observatory, which are a little more independent, do go and speak to Congress, describe the impacts, and we take a system level approach to that. Of course, Keck being part of it, but we describe the impacts broadly. So I think, we are trying to speak with one voice and put it together on that.
So, but it sounds like rather than having a lead person who is the spokesperson, there's going to be many people kind of representing different interests. In that case, wouldn't it be good for us all to kind of see the sheet of music? That is, what are the key talking points? What are the key priorities that we're all in agreement upon? And no matter who's up there talking to whom, or wherever, that we're all saying the same thing. It'd be good to see that developed and shared widely.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we're still developing those talking points. Understanding, but yeah, I'd be happy to share next time, and in the interim with the board.
Related to our position, and I think this is for John and John, it'd be really important, I think, for us to make this a math problem, or to see this as a math issue, and develop various scenarios based on different kinds of cuts and how it affects different kinds of services, and what our plan A, plan B, plan C options might be to restore or to keep whatever services we can. That if we can get things restored, what's our plan? Are we gonna, if we lose money on the federal side, from NSF, are we gonna make it up from a certain source? Or do we cut services? And so we gotta balance this budget somehow. And so we've got to start looking at, kind of financial scenarios at the earliest possible time. Is that effort in the works?
I think it's premature, to tell you the truth. There's so many variables, right? I mean, I agree that at some point we're going to have to look at it. I think to start running scenarios right now is premature, because part of the challenge is what I described earlier, right? What is going to be the cut, and what's going to be the impact to the observatories about their ability to continue operations and yet still make contributions for shared services. And each observatory that says, I don't know if this is true or not, but each observatory that says we cannot continue to financially support that puts greater impact on the surviving the other observatories. You see what I'm saying? So it's super. It's not only a financial analysis, but analysis about how many players do you have, and each time you take out one player, does that end up, because of the increased cost to each of the other surviving, does that take out another observatory? And we don't have that type of insight right now. But I agree with you. We kind of just, at some point we're going to have to look at it, because I'm pretty sure, what do you call that? RTRF? RTRF is funds that were generated by the overhead to the entire university, that are research dollars that were allocated to overhead. And on an annual basis, the CMS would be requesting between $500,000 to $700,000, around that ballpark for the RTRF, right? So for guaranteed, the RTRF has been reduced from 40% to 15%.
Well, the fiscal year 25, we received our final RTRF contribution, and we've been notified starting fiscal year 26, we will not receive any more contributions.
So there is at least a gap of, if we look at the budget as it stands now, 500,000. Okay, so we know for sure that that gap increases as we go through this analysis that you talked about. So anyway, we gotta take it.
I take your point. I take your point that so many ideas are flying around, and it's really hard to fix on anything. You'd be doing endless scenarios, but I do think it's necessary. It is timely to develop the base case. So put that. We're asking questions about, does that go there, or where do we get that from, and so forth. So it's educational, number one, to kind of know how things are funded, and in setting that up in a spreadsheet, what you do is you're ready then. When ideas come forth and you can see the impact on funding, you can run immediate impact analysis and say, okay, this is going to have this much effect on us. And then but it just gives you the tool and that prepares us as well as educates us.
I agree. We're having some agenda creep here for a second, because we're going to get to this in item 8B, relative to the president's federal budget request and the report that Rich and Mayor Alameda was able to expand on. Anybody on the board have any questions related?
Rather than trying to split everything up like that, let's go skip to Greg's
Yeah,
report,
yeah,
and then have to try to have people just,
Yeah,
they're all interrelated, right?
Yeah, so what we're going to do at this time is we'll come back to item 6D and finance, and we'll jump directly to item 8A. And Greg, why don't we start with the operational update?
Okay, thank you, aloha board members. On the operational update, really there hasn't been, there isn't much to report. Things have been pretty quiet and functioning smoothly on the Mauna. No major issues with projects or anything like that. The one thing that I did want to update the board on, which I briefed you folks previously, is recently with the last couple of projects that some of which that you have reviewed, that we took to Office of Coastal and Conservation Lands for permitting. They've begun requiring their land division to look and approve and sign off on those project proposals as well. That's never been the case before, so this was a new wrinkle. And so we were able to, Nahua and I were able to have a meeting with the new land division administrator, excuse me, as well as their Big Island manager, and get some clarification on exactly what it is that they would be looking for and whether they in fact need to or want to review every single proposal that we process. We got some clarification, but not complete clarification. But at this point, any project that requires either a site plan approval or conservation district use permit, basically the kind of projects that MKSOA has decided they want to review as well, those will have to also go to land division for their review also. Exactly what they're looking for is not exactly clear, but the best we were able to get is any kind of improvement that requires another agency's permit, like a building permit, a Department of Health permit or something like that, they'll want to look at. Anything that requires a CDP or a site plan approval, they'll want to look at. But other than that, it's not real clear. So we actually have 3 projects now that were sent to the Office of Coastal and Conservation Lands that we had to send, compile again and send it to Land Division. And we're waiting on those decisions at this point. The reason why it's important is that it just puts another step in the whole process that potentially leads to further delays and requires not just CMS, but the observatories, when they're deciding what they want to move forward with on an annual basis, they have to allow for some additional time in the process. I will say, just as an aside, I raise it here also because I do think it has implications for MKSOA. It raises the issue of why I think it's important to get clarification around how MKSOA will hold property interests in the lands that you are going to be managing. We are going through this because we hold a lease. And I understand Act 255 is pretty clear on the authorities that MKSOA is supposed to have, but it's not clear on exactly how you guys get there. So I just raise that as a point that this doesn't just affect us, but potentially has implications for you folks down the road as well. So that concludes my operations report. Any questions on that? Did you want to move on then?
Yeah, why don't we move on to our joint management committee? And let me open up by calling everyone's attention to our last board meeting when Nahua took the board through the presentation on the management plan, comprehensive management plan, master plan, and administrative rules. You should all still have access to that presentation, and I would encourage everyone to become as oriented as possible in understanding that, because those plans at the joint management committee level are live and functioning, okay? From the MKSOA standpoint, we're moving toward those plans becoming expired no later than June 30, 2028. But during this transition period, of which we have 36 months left, these three plans remain intact. Now, earlier in this conversation, going back a couple of board meetings, I used the term adopted by the board, or an adoption of these plans. Let me rephrase that and say that my recommendation, staff's recommendation, is that the board allow us to function at the JMC level, recognizing that these plans are in effect. The caveat being that projects that have moderate impact or major impact are coming back to the MKSOA board for review and approval, okay? The minute we take it to a board level, it can become subject to a public review again, which means that we're out introducing ourselves and the strategic framework to the public. We'd then be out putting these plans back in front of the public, and then we're about to take on a management consultant to come up with our own management plan. And the confusion that that would cause at the community level is not fair to the community, frankly. So ever since we've been in this joint management committee formation, going back to September of last year, it's just important to know that we are functioning with those plans in the course of our normal work at the JMC. Greg, you have anything to add on that?
No, I think, I mean, in many regards, that's what's actually happening now with the board reviewing certain projects. I mean, you're already complying with that process, have agreed to participate in that process. So it would certainly help clarify things in terms of how the JMC proceeds moving forward. So I fully support that idea.
Okay. Going back to the point raised by member Neil Hennis earlier, even before the federal cutback, MKSOA and CMS currently are looking at a 36-month transition plan that is timeline with specific events having to happen. My sense is we're probably 2 to 3 weeks away from having that plan that we can then bring back to the performance and oversight PIG, okay? Because it's really important that we get that foundational piece in place before we start taking on the series of tidal waves that are coming, right? And at minimum, Neil, we have to presume that the current cuts are going to survive as a scenario, right? And if they don't survive and are corrected in some way, we can make that adjustment, okay? I also want to add that at no time am I suggesting that this board is in full concurrence with the UH maximum number of telescopes being 9, okay? That would be a major impact issue and we would be back in front of the board. So there are elements in those plans that we will have the opportunity to audit, debate, and take action on as appropriate. So I'm not asking everybody to just assume that that's the position of MKSOA. Okay, Greg, you want to talk about the impact of the funding, some of the early read you're getting?
Sure. So if we can move on to the next item, you have some materials that I included in the board packet. I'm not going to, Rich covered pretty much all this stuff. I'm not going to get to it in detail, but maybe if you could go to the third slide, please. Fourth slide, next one. Yeah. So this pretty much gives a snapshot of the reductions proposed in the NASA and NSF and Smithsonian budgets that Rich walked us through. And here you see highlighted the observatories on Mauna Kea that potentially have an impact. I think the biggest issue here is we actually don't know how these cuts, should they stay in place, will flow down and actually affect the individual observatories' budgets. So we are having to sort of anticipate some different scenarios right now, not knowing exactly what to anticipate, what will happen. I can tell you that just from a CMS perspective, you know, I have reported before, as John mentioned earlier, we have already received our last allocation from UH's RTRF funds. We got $400,000 for fiscal year 25. We will not be receiving any more going forward. We have typically received between $500,000 and $750,000. There have been significant, impacts in general, just even before the NSF and NASA budget, where the administration's budget proposals were put forward. There already have been impacts to UH research in general because of everything that has been going on at the federal level. And that has already led to policy changes across the system. So we are under increased scrutiny around our hiring, around travel, and obviously any large purchases. So that's already been in place. Now with these potential additional impacts, we anticipate there will be more restrictions on how we spend our funds. Next week, we have a couple of meetings with the MKOs regarding the budget. On Tuesday, there is a directors meeting where we'll be discussing the shared services budget. And that's the budget that they primarily contribute to. And then the day after, we actually have an oversight committee meeting, and that's the committee that actually has to approve the fiscal year 26 budget, excuse me, that we've been working with them on. So we don't know what's going to happen in the directors meeting and what the final MKSS budget that the observatories will approve will be. But in anticipation of various scenarios, we are looking at where we can defer maintenance, defer some large purchases, hold the line on hiring. We've already been notified by RCUH about limits on this year's compensation adjustments, so we've had to reduce that. Things like that. So those are that's already in place. The other thing that we at CMS are closely watching and obviously in discussions with TMT about is with the potential loss of their funding, we don't know how that will impact their ability to pay their current lease rent. They pay twice a year, in August and in January. In total, it's a little over 1.5 million a year. We use those funds to fund our Ranger program, which is our largest cost center, along with some of our stewardship programs. So that would be a large impact to our budget directly with the loss of those funds. But at this point, TMT continues to be optimistic and positive about, they are committed to the project, they tell us, they are committed to Hawaii. But we just don't know how these impacts might actually flow down. The last thing that we have done or are doing that you folks helped us with is, as you know, we have proposed increasing commercial tour operator rates. That is actually something that we have to take to the Board of Regents for approval now that we've gone through all of our internal steps. So we are on the agenda for August to take that to the Board of Regents. And we anticipate that once that gets in place, which we're shooting for October, on an annual basis, those revenues, if tourism were to stay at the visitor counts were to stay at the same levels, would increase our budget about 600,000. So could make up for the RTRF piece. But what we don't know is impacts to the Mauna Kea, the observatories, as well as TMT in particular. So if we could go to the last slide. So as I've shared with John and a few others, in fact, what we know far less than what we don't know at this point. We know that NSF has paused their Section 106 process for TMT. The impact to UH and MKO budgets is unclear. But once those become clear, we know that that will flow down to our stewardship and research support activities. We are certain, however, that there will be impacts. We just don't know the magnitude. Obviously, a lot of things can change between now and when the fiscal year 26 budget is approved. And politics will determine that outcome. Thus, the need for strong voices. And the impacts to IFA are still to be determined, like all of us. But the threat to Hawaii astronomy in general will far beyond TMT. You know, a lot of the media coverage is focused on TMT, and understandably. But as Rich pointed out, the risk to Hawaii astronomy in general is in some ways much larger. That concludes my report on the federal funding situation.
Any other questions or comments about the federal budget reduction, proposed budget reduction?
Hi, hello everybody. Hello, I'm on the other side of the planet right now, so it's 11 p.m. for me. I had a question too, and if maybe Greg, if you have any information on how these budget cuts have put or threatened any other sciences. I know there's a lot of other studies that are conducted on the mountain that are actually critical to conservation. I've heard through the grapevine, as well as other in other arenas of conservation work amongst a lot of our bird conservationists, foresters, a lot of those type of programs. They have already lost jobs, even under the threat of cuts. Agencies have pulled back funds, and these type of work, these sciences, we lose these, we have we continue extinctions taking place. And so I'm wondering, is there any information on the impacts to any of the other sciences and the other studies on the mountain that I think that it's quite critical to our conversation and our kuleana?
I know there have been, but I don't have the data on the specific impacts. I don't know, Bonnie, if you might be able to add something.
Yeah, thank you, Lanakila. That's a great question. The grants that are under threat, or some that have been canceled, are those having to do with climate change and how that's become, you know, a word we're not, or a phrase we're not supposed to use anymore. So I can get you some more detail about what agencies, but I know just within UH Hilo has only lost one grant so far that supports students. But MKSOA has lost grants in SOEST, which does the ocean science, right, and atmospheric science. We've lost various entities on island and across the state have lost agriculture grants. But conservation in particular, at least at UH Hilo, ours are intact. But I'm not sure what the impact on MKSOA has been. So I'll take a look at that and try to get some detail out to the board.
Yeah, I would really like to make a request that, yeah, if we can get information and check in with all the those other avenues of study and research, especially as that I think is a very important component to consider too, that's also when we're talking about the budget balance on the astronomy and stuff, we know that those impacts for them to be able to pay their, you know, their portions would have impact predominantly maybe in arenas of like the road in particular, which is needed and accessed by these other scientific departments as well too. So just kind of leveraging that or seeing that across the board to how if those areas or yeah, exactly too, especially in the realm of forestry conservation, and I know like our bird and entomology is critical and that we discuss a lot with. So mahalo.
Yeah, we can get that.
I'm gonna ask Bill to comment.
Thanks for the question, Lanakila. Aloha, everybody. One of the things we've done recently is begin to have regular, not super frequent, but regular contacts and interaction between MKSOA, CMS staff, and staff with the Division of Forestry and Wildlife, and our partners that neighbor our lands on Mauna Kea, DHHL, Mauna Kea Watershed Alliance, and DoCare. And we have our next meeting tomorrow of this group at Halepohaku. So I'll pose the question to the branch manager at Forestry and Wildlife, Steve Bergfield. But I talk about boots on the ground. We can get some semblance of an idea of the kind of impacts they are seeing in their budgets and in their staffing, because they do get a lot of federal grants. And a lot of employees that are hired through Research Corporation, University of Hawaii, and there have been impacts to those projects, specific projects. So I'll pose the question tomorrow, Lanakila, and I'll have a summary for you and the rest of the board members to put out perhaps sometime next week.
Awesome, mahalo nui.
Any other comments, questions?
So let's open it up to Mayor. I know you said you had some comments. Let's look at the comments both now, just in general, about the federal cuts as well as the impacts that Greg mentioned. I know Mayor, and open it up to everybody else, but the Mayor said he had some comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to update you guys on full transparency, right? So I came back from DC, had a nice talk story with the 4 congressional delegates. And, you know, it seems like from the 4 talk stories that we had, the most significant probably was with Congressman Case and Senator Schatz. So, and then also just kind of a side note, before that, I went to the Pentagon to talk about, you know, I wanted to get deeper to know like how important is Po'akaloa. So kind of like 2 discussions at the same time, man. But one day it was all Po'akaloa, just learning just for myself, like, you know, like all the things I was raised knowing about that place and cultural impacts and all that. I just wanted to get as much clarity as possible. So if I advocating for whatever side, at least I get as much truth as I know possible. So that was a real good talk story there. But jumping over to Mauna Kea, so the impression I was left with Ed Case and Senator Schatz was that, you know, when I asked about funding and astronomy and cultural protections, I mean, it seemed to me like the response back was like, hey, we're waiting for you guys, you know, the authority. You know, we don't like push hard for something that you guys going to end up not agreeing on, or somehow if you're going in a different direction. So in that sense, I agree with Neil. I don't think it's premature to come up with some kind of baseline. Like, what do we we had that talk story about, in 100 years, what we like for the mountain, but, and then we had a couple of these talk stories on values and concepts and all, but I think the nitty gritty, what people like know is, when you're going to act on your decommissioning plan, which I think should be on standing agenda item. Every time we meet, every month we meet, I'll see when the application got sent in for the next decommission, and how come the thing not moving along faster than it should? And like, we should always be talking about the decommissioning plan every time we meet, at least one standing, that way it pushes us to make sure that we're living up to our promises. Because what I'm hearing from our Kiai Ohana is that, we got to continue to move forward on the decommissioning. So that's the point that I like make. So I got the impression that, they're supportive of astronomy, yeah, but they're also waiting for us because we know we're not going to add now because no more funding for TMT. But what we get control over is what we're going to take away. So every time we talk, we should be talking about the takeaway part, right? To make less. That's why I'm always asking questions about, hey, if no need to be on the mountain, then find another place for them. Going back to Lanikila's proposal of forestation. Because there is a happy balance, but we're not moving to that balance. And let me just say this, that as long as we're silent, and because that's advocacy as well. If you're silent, John, then to me, that's advocacy for the status quo. So we gotta not be silent, either way. So I'm proposing we push hard for some kind of consensus on what we like for the Mauna, so that we have something to advocate for. And I agree with Neil on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Well said, comments or thoughts. Anybody else? If not, let me share some just, I wrote down some thoughts that not going to be in a very cohesive way. But first of all, what's happening with all these cuts, Greg mentioned about the impact to Hawaii astronomy. These actually have impact to the United States role in astronomy in general, right? But it also, to Lanakila's point, also has impacts to other sciences, this is major long-term impact. As someone said, we're losing scientists. China has started construction of a huge observatory that would rival TMT on the Tibetan plain. Other countries may seek to join with China to get involved in that. And America's leadership in science and long-term opportunities for children, students, whatever in the United States for science has been greatly affected. So it's a very, very major change that's happening in the United States. Now, MKSOA's role, and I heard what you say, Mayor, the legislature has determined in its act, contained in Act 255, that support of astronomy is a state policy. And we're guided in part. We have other principles and other issues that we have to, but we're guided in part by that. It's not clear what that exactly means. And the reason why I bring that up is that, we've talked about at least a $500,000 gap. As we move forward and may want to consider making up that gap, making up the gaps that are sure to occur, and who knows what. I'm not sure that the legislative appropriation of $14 million was intended to cover making up that gap. So from a policy standpoint, I think we're going to have to get clarification from the legislature if we intend to make up that gap. How whether or not that $14 million was intended, or we are allowed to make up that gap. The other thing, and I've been posed this question before, so the question is, since at least at the current time, it's being recommended by the president that through the NSF that TMT not be funded, should MKSOA go away? Or what are you guys doing? Or why do we need you? And my response is that whether TMT is built or not, MKSOA continues to have the obligation to co-manage the MAUNA until 2028 and take over management. So there is a critical function that we will serve, and the kind of complex questions that have been raised and discussed today, that we will continue to have a function, and that the community's continued support of us and understanding that going through these complex issues is needed. But there is a belief, at least that's, to some of the people that talk to me, that once it's decided that TMT is or is not going to be funded or going to go forward, that MKSOA is irrelevant. So we have to make sure that we have to explain to people why MKSOA is relevant, right? So anyway, one of the challenges is with this federal, we don't know who to, there's no one you can talk to specifically or identify to get further clarity. For example, what does it mean that Gemini will be operating at 50%? You talk to the Gemini people, to say that they don't even know what that means. But who do you talk to? There's a feeling that NSF is not the one that wrote that language, that some other department or other agency wrote that language as making the decisions through NSF. So that's another one of these challenges. It's not clear that the philosophy behind saying why Gemini should operate at 50% capacity is not clear. So when you try to create arguments about, well, you should fully support Gemini, it's hard to create specific arguments if you don't understand the philosophy behind it. So anyway, the whole point is that, we had a complex job before these federal cuts. Our jobs just got way, way more difficult. And our focus is sort of shifting because of these federal cuts. So anyway, we'll try to do the best we can in getting more information and understanding what's happening. But there's going to be so much, and to Lanakeel's point, the budget cuts don't only happen to astronomy, they're happening to other sciences, but more than that, they're happening to social services, they're happening to all these other critical issues, Medicaid and all these things. So astronomy is probably less than 1% of the cuts that we're talking about, and we'll focus on that because that's our mission, right? But nonetheless, as this thing gets negotiated, you have all of these other requirements or needs that people are going to be advocating to be put back in terms of funding into the budget. So the complexity is not only within science, not only with astronomy, but as part of this entire budgetary process. So like I said, super complex issue, super complex problem. Yeah, Mayor.
Thank you. The previous, real quick, and then I jump to this real quick comment. The previous discussions we had was that regarding decommissioning was that money was already put aside from each of the potential decommissioning telescopes. So I'm guessing, I'm hoping that these federal cuts somehow not impacting those decommission funds, because that's what we have control over, right? We don't have control over all this stuff that John, you just mentioned about, but we do have control over what we already know. And what we already know is there's money already allocated for decommissioning. So again, just to reemphasize my point, that's a plan that we can move forward on that our people would be happy about, because at least we get movement. Right now, we just keep meeting every month, but I'll make sure the community movement.
Mayor, with all due respect, we gotta go. We're going as fast as we can. Okay. Part of the challenge is, UH as part of the CDUP for TMT says that VLBA should be the next observatory that is decommissioned. It says that in the CDUP. Now we know that the federal government has made a policy decision that no, VLBA should not be fully funding it. So we gotta get all that kind of information to understand how UH is also supposed to come up by border regions, not mandate, well, maybe it is a mandate. Resolution. UH is supposed to come up with a decommissioning plan by the end of this calendar year, I believe, right? So they are coming up with their own recommendation as to what should be decommissioned. But I would be surprised that we have the knowledge right
I thought the
now.
plan was done. I thought Richard just shared with us the last time that plan is, we get the decommission plan already. We just gotta act on it now.
No, they gotta say which of the observatories they recommend should be decommissioned. That has not been decided yet.
Okay, I just want to add one point for, it's an important informational point. The observatories, even though they may have, some of them may have been identified, they all have legal rights to be on the Mauna until 2033. So we don't have control over telling them, you got to decommission now, okay? The whole idea was to put in place a plan where we could plan in a phased way of getting there. And that was all attached to new lease agreements with them. We no longer control new lease negotiations. We no longer control setting that limit on what the footprint should be. And they have every right to be there until 2033. The only observatories that we can control at this point are our UH observatories. And so that's what Doug Simons has been working on currently, or is working on currently. So things changed things changed with the creation of MKSOA and the idea that some of our responsibilities were going to be shifting to you folks.
Just so people know, decommissioning the process to get approval for decommissioning takes 5 to 7, including the actual decommissioning, takes 5 to 7 years. If you got to come up with an EIS, you got to get borderland and natural approval. It's very complex.
That's why we gotta start already.
If I might, we actually had a grasp of this, the importance of how we communicate all of our goals and objectives when we started our work with Chris, and that work got overtaken a little bit by the management plan review and so forth, and our need to kind of get that RFP out to start that ball. So, but I think what the mayor is emphasizing that we need to come back to that in our work with Chris. Our work should really, people understand you when you communicate consistently about everything. And especially when you have something like a decommissioning plan that may take a long period of time, when they don't hear about it, they think maybe we've forgotten it. And so establishing a reporting framework that really aligns with our agenda, that covers all of our critical functions and responsibilities. Remember, we're the Mauna Kea Stewardship and Oversight Authority, not the Astronomy Stewardship and Oversight Authority, And so to Lanakila's point, if we set that up and say, the critical things that we're managing on the Mauna are astronomy, our cultural, it is a cultural wahipana, natural resources, commercial activity, education, whatever that is, we set that up and we set up, here are the key things happening under each. And under astronomy, decommissioning is a key thing. And then we help align people's expectations by saying, here's the decommissioning activity. And maybe it says, you're not gonna hear from this until 2030, or you're not gonna hear about this one until 29, whatever that is. But the public, we remind ourselves what our job is and track activity accordingly. And we also remind the public that we haven't forgotten the things that are important to them. And
part of what you're saying is if we can issue this RFP to the planner, if we look at what the scope of responsibility is for the planner, is in part to bring a structured way to address some of these issues that you just raised, including decommissioning.
Right.
In terms of So the plan is that we're supposed to be through with the plan in a year and a half, right? But the functions or the areas that this planning group will help us with are those areas that, and so that's the necessity to get this planning person on board right away, so we can have that kind of timetable exactly what you talked about.
Well, we had already taken all of our mandates. We scoured the statute for everything that they told us we're supposed to do. And we were tracking all of that, and then we kind of put that aside because we had to work maybe on the RFP. And yeah, these things will marry. These things will integrate and come together nicely. And so it's just I'm not complaining about anything because I know, like you said, we're under resourced. We're moving as fast as we can. But to the mayor's point, and to Lanakila's point, these other things are really important. And the way you signal to people that you haven't forgotten is you establish a reporting framework that really routinely comes back to it. Even if it's to say, as planned, there's nothing happening this month, but wait till 6 months from now, they can see it. And then they know they don't make things up that we've forgotten it or we're not going to do it. We've abandoned the idea. We become transparent and accountable. So, and I know nobody is in disagreement. I don't think anybody on this authority disagrees with that. It's just, working real hard to kind of get that thing stood up. And the big step will be taken when we issue the RFP and bring that management consultant on board and integrate that with the work we've already done. And so even when it rolls out, it may come out kind of in a primitive version at first, but then you keep populating as the details flow in as we do the field work. Anyway, everybody's impatient. All these needs are really important. It's just we just got to step by step. We got to exercise some patience, and we just got to. It's a reminder of urgency, and so I think we should take that in as a reminder of urgency and keep working hard at this.
Neil, let me add that the work with Chris got slowed down but didn't stop, and we are like 2.5 weeks from not only understanding the individual components of what needs to get done, but the sequencing that has to happen, right? And we've got an array of upcoming meetings, legislative meetings in the month of July that document has to be ready for. So the performance and oversight pig should count on us meeting in about 2 weeks to take the first review of that, okay? And then by the time we come back to next month's board meeting, we'll be able to present it in the way that you're describing.
Lanakila.
The question of clarification on kind of the general process. So if I just to understand, so like previously, Greg, you guys were creating the decommissioning plan, which is again just a point of recommendation because these different astronomies are, and correct me if I'm wrong, are private, right? They're predominantly private leasers, so they have their leases have a due date, and that's why just like anybody else, I signed my lease until this year. I have that lease. The landlord can't just kick me out or can't tell me exactly what to do. But how much is the responsibility also on whether it was UH or us to come up with the decommissioning plan as far as for them, as knowing that they have a time step too of what are the these different private companies doing in their processing of decommissioning planning? Just because if it's planning, it's just process planning. So I'm just a little confused. How much are we doing for them? Because that's also our resources being used up to create the decommissioning plan for private companies. So I'm just a little, I wonder the process of how much is on them, how much to us.
We've been using the term decommissioning plan in 2 different ways, I think, right? So our responsibility along with CMS at this point is to identify, first we've got to develop criteria. How are you going to judge about what the carrying capacity is for the Mauna? what is the criteria that you're going to create to measure whether our individual observatory meets those criteria or doesn't meet that criteria? And therefore, if they don't meet it, maybe that's one observatory that should be decommissioned. We're going to decide the carrying capacity of the Mauna and how many observatories should be on the Mauna, and which of the existing telescopes, if any, get taken down. Okay. Once you identify observatory, how they take it down is their plan. We don't get involved in the planning as it relates to, okay, you've been identified as a one that has to be decommissioned. You figure out how you're going to take it down, the timetable, cost, expense, all that stuff. We're not. We have some. I think we have some oversight review, but they have the obligation to create that plan. So when you say decommissioning plan for the individual observatories, they are the observatories that have been identified would be primary. We have, but the overall plan is us. I think, hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Yeah, that really did help clarify. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Okay, you want to go to?
Okay, let me move to item 8B3, and Greg and I can make some comments on this. About 2 months ago, Greg and I first started having informal talks about what possibilities co-funding of the expenses would look like. And on one end, co-funding. On the other end, we also talked about a scenario where MKSOA might contract CMS, again, during this transition period. We left that conversation, both of us, open to kind of looking at both scenarios and possibly finding a third or fourth one that might work. We tabled it at that time because our funding request was still moving through the legislature and has yet to be signed into law. And then about 2 weeks ago, Greg and I had an opportunity to meet with Chancellor Bonnie Irwin to get her thoughts and feedback, and she encouraged us to kind of look at what that possibility might be. Keep in mind, these conversations were happening before all this federal stuff came in. So now it's created, it's become a very cavernous conversation. And so going back to laying out a 30-month transition plan, the proper sequencing, the impact to MKOs across the board, the impact to IFA and CMS, all of that now becomes factors. And I'll be at the MKO meeting with Greg and the directors of MKO next week, Tuesday, and we're in for a deep dive. But this idea, the concept of co-funding or contracting is something I've talked to the performance and oversight PIG in general terms about, conceptual terms. Greg's had an opportunity to socialize it on his side as well. Greg, I don't know what else you want to add at this point.
I think it's obviously something that we would be very open and interested in, even more so now. But as John said, we had started these discussions previously. I think part of the rationale here is also to look at minimizing impact to operations and to people during the transition period. We know you folks have positions that have been approved. Some of those positions, some of our employees may be candidates. And, it just seems like with all the uncertainty going on, it would be wise for us to consider, is there a model out there of sort of maintaining the current base level of operations at some level, while you folks develop your plan and understand your staffing needs and all of that, before we start moving people and sort of taking people out of one role and putting them in maybe a not yet clearly defined role. As Chair Komeji has said, the interdependencies of all of these things that we are dealing with, whether it's the budget, whether it's the transition plan, the work that Chris is helping you folks with, the management plan, establishing a footprint, they all interrelate. And what we have to do is sort of understand first, when we start pulling on one thing, what's the downstream effects of that? And that is not something that we clearly have our hands around. I can anticipate some of that stuff, but even I don't know sort of everything that could happen if we decided to do X versus Y at this point. So we are going to have to build this thing as we're flying it.
You know, I would also add, I'll give you a real fundamental, boring example. Months and months of getting this interim office done. The interim office has 6 workstations. Early on this year, we put in for 7 more that we're about to get. We tried to go after an office that had 13 or 15 workstations, right? And we were prevented from doing that because at the time of our request, we were only authorized to have 6, okay? So if you keep operating like this, and then we get another set of temporary positions coming out of this legislation, of the 7, let's say 5 to 6 of them, the most qualified candidates currently work for Greg. So I hire him away from Greg into a temporary role. The 5 I hired from Greg has now got a new set of 5 temporary positions, okay? And this kind of cannibalizing of an operation just didn't make any sense. And that's what prompted the conversation about how do we take away the seam, because the system on the mountain is working, okay? And how do we prevent that system from being interrupted, being dismantled, and at the same time help MKSOA achieve our goals as well. And so we'll continue to update this board on what our recommendations would be relative to co-funding or contracting. I think cooperative agreement is another model that UH and RCUH also has. So we'll be back in front of you to present our recommendations in the coming months. Any questions?
To Lloyd's reports.
Yeah. Okay. Hearing none, I'm going to go back to item 6D, update on consulting services. MKSOA received in the RFP process 2 high-quality presentations. On Monday, a selection will be announced. And at the time of that announcement, you as board members will be notified as well. For today, that's about all we can talk about. We can't talk about the identities of the evaluation committee or the offerers, but we're right there within 2 to 3 working days of getting that information to you. It should not interrupt the rest of our timeline in getting the contract. The one thing I will say, though, that you should anticipate is one of the things, once the award is finalized, early on, that firm is going to have to get in front of you as board members to get your mana'o on helping them frame priorities that represent individual perspectives as well as the strategic framework that is now in draft form. And that's why I want to go back and emphasize the existing plans are going to be reference documents for the firm. And so if there are any concerns inside those documents that you as board members have, you'll have an opportunity to voice that in the process. And but that's going to be important that the firm get to the board early in their work going forward.
Yeah, so to kind of clarify or add to that, we understand the urgency, right? And we understand the need to work quickly. So and I think I have consensus among the board, is that we're not going to start from scratch. If there are areas that the board as a whole can agree to, that within the UH master plan and management plan, we're going to accept those and set those aside, and let's not try to start from scratch with those. Let's just focus on those areas where people have concerns, people have want to tweak something, want to redo something, but let's hopefully get to a point where half of our work has already been done, we can accept from UH, okay? Does anybody have any problem with that kind of idea? Because we gotta move quickly, right? All right, so I think we have consensus on that.
Okay, any other questions about a topic we can't talk about? It's like, I appreciate your patience, and you'll hear from me on Monday when that award is made. So thank you.
All right, Lloyd, you want to give your finance report?
Yeah, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. As you saw in my May's presentation, unfortunately, I had to make a reclassification. My apologies. As I looked at the overall 11 months of information that I got off of our financial system, I recapped everything again, and I realized that early on in my financial statements, I over reported on payroll. So I did make an adjustment. And as of right now, we have approximately $2.6 million of our $3.6 million available, and it will be used for our management consultants services contract that we anticipate. So if there's any questions, I'll be able to answer it. Other than that, what you see is what we have right now. Thank you.
Any questions about the budget and where we are in spending? Okay, does anyone want to go into executive?
But did Senator Law ever come?
Oh, no. No. Yeah.
Okay.
The question was whether or not Senator Law, who asked to testify, has he made an appearance, and he has not. So we're going to go ahead without his testimony, because I'm at the point where, does anyone have the necessity to consult with our attorney about any issues that were discussed today? Okay, having said that, we'll move then to announcements. Next meeting is July 10th. Hope to have more clarity. And although it says on the agenda that we're going to have our top story as reported by Executive Director, the June 26th meeting is off, right? We are trying to reschedule it for sometime in July. So just again, to repeat, the June 26th meeting is not happening. We will reschedule for sometime in July. Okay, any other announcements?
Chair, just confirming the 10th, meeting on the 10th, will have a Zoom option.
Yes,
Okay, well,
okay. Any other questions, any other?
Let me make one, please, board members, RSVP your availability or non-availability for Thursday, July 7th, between 17th, I'm sorry, July 17th, between 3 and 8 p.m., which allows us to prep and debrief as well.
Lana Kila already responded in this chat, so anyway, just take that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Any other yes, sir, Mayor?
No, just thank you. That July 17th, yeah, you said.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I can be there.
Okay.
Oh, why may I still get?
No, Kona.
It'll be in
Oh,
Kona.
Yeah, we're trying to go around the plan, so everybody is clear, is that we're trying to hit all these different geographic areas in on the Big Island. So we went to Waimea, we want to go to Kona, Naalehu, and then Hilo. Right?
And then back to Honoka'a.
No, not Honoka'a. Waimea.
For my one to go back.
Okay.
For my one to Honoka'a. Wanakila, that's your call too. And, you know.
We gotta find a room, bro.
I got a whole theater for us that'll call.
They got nice facilities in Honoka'a.
All right, thank you. If not, anything else? Not, seek a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Second. Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. All right, thanks, everybody. Heavy duty meeting. Aloha.
Tomorrow.